I'm Philip Morgan, a senior reporter with the Hillsdale Collegian. Here's my Q&A session with Canadian writer and political commentator Mark Steyn.
I think there's certainly a double standard. Bill Maher routinely uses the C word about Sarah Palin. I don't know why even. I mean, I don't. The things that are said about Sarah Palin's kid. The guy who was going to host the big dinner in Washington, or whatever he's called, Louis CJ or whatever the guy's called, or CK or whatever he's called. Uh, he did all these things about obscene tweets about Sarah Palin's intimate parts and her child. Uh, it's not just that there's a double standard. It's that it's a very bizarre world in which anybody could possibly think that calling Sarah Palin the C word is the height of wit. I that's what I aside from anything else, that's what I object to. I mean, I don't think it kind of passes muster as a joke. Generally speaking, I'm a kind of believer in civility, but I think that the right shouldn't get its knickers in a twist by making a virtue out of not playing by the left's rules. You know, we on the right are losing the culture. The culture is coarse. 10 years ago, I would guess it is now, Janet Jackson got into trouble because she exposed a nipple at the Super Bowl. I have no view on the nipple one way or the other. If you drive through France, you'll pass billboards of topless women, and in America that would be advertising a strip joint or something for which the topless woman would be directly relevant. But in France, it could be just advertising a particular loaf of bread. So you'll be you'll be looking at the topless woman, and she's advertising sliced bread or something. So I've got no view on the nipple one way or the other. What bothered me is that the 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 5 minutes of Janet Jackson prancing around the stage before she exposed the nipple was coarse and witless and charmless and crass and vulgar. And in a sense, I think the right have retreated. The right have said, oh, we're going to play by different rules, and we're not going to do this and we're not going to do that. And setting a higher standard for ourselves while popular culture decays and essentially the Bill Maher level of coarseness becomes the default mode of culture. I'm not sure is useful. I think in the end you can't accept the double standard, and you have to push back at these guys on their home turf. I mean, culture trumps economics every time. Every time, culture trumps economics. Culture trumps politics. And the air we breathe Bill Maher's fetid air. It's very hard when you're breathing in Bill Maher's fetid air 365 days a year to then expect people to go and vote for a Conservative candidate on a Tuesday morning in November. So at some point the right has to have a strategy for taking back that side of the culture. I think I wrote that when I was down in Australia. I was down in Oz a couple of weeks ago, and it was interesting. Every time I went into an ABC show, ABC I guess is like their big public broadcaster. It's like the BBC or I guess maybe PBS, NPR over here. They all said, all the people said, well, how can Rick Santorum be a credible candidate for the presidency? He's so weird. And when you then actually ask them what it is that's weird about him, he's weird because he thinks marriage is between a man and a woman. He's weird because he thinks that the family is the basic building block of society. Those were things that you'd be amazed, but only the day before yesterday, people didn't consider that stuff weird at all. In fact, it was non-weird for almost all of human history. So what's interesting to me is not Santorum's weirdness, but the fact that so much of what he says is now presumed to be weird, because I think he's right on the basics issue, which is that the crisis America faces is not primarily an accounting problem or a bookkeeping problem. We're broke for a reason. This country is the brokest nation in history because it is not the Republic of Limited Government and Self-Reliant Citizenry that Tocqueville observed 2 centuries ago. So he's right in that extent, that the brokenness is a symptom of the problem, not the problem. And in that sense, I don't find Santorum half as weird as 90% of his critics. No, I don't. If you mean by a serious civil rights issue, do you mean I think it's 1962 and Selma, Alabama? No, and nobody does except Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. Oh, sorry, I should say the Reverend Al Sharpton and the Reverend Jesse Jackson. I don't quite know how long it's been since the Reverend Jackson was actually a practicing pastor at any church, but we are obliged to call him the Reverend Jackson for all eternity. But these superannuated hucksters are making a very nice living out of this cobwebbed grievance mongering. What's interesting is that the rest of the world has moved on. There's no real white guy involved in this. They want you to think it's like a Klansman, a white racist killed some black guy. Well, he isn't. For a start, this guy is a registered Democrat. He's half Hispanic, which is why the New York Times has had to invent this phrase, quote, white Hispanic, unquote, for him, a phrase hitherto unknown to American journalism. It's never been used before in the New York Times, never been used in the Washington Post, never been used in the Chicago Tribune. White Hispanic was a phrase constructed, an ethnic category constructed so that this guy could still be white enough to fit the narrative of the Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton superannuated race huckstering. And it's pathetic. Because what's interesting about this story is that it shows America's moved on. Here we have. I mean, none of us knows the circumstances of this. As Jackson and Sharpton allege, did this guy racially profile the black teenager in the hoodie and take action? Maybe the black teenager in the hoodie racially profiled the middle-aged Hispanic coming towards him and thought, oh, I wonder what this is. Is this one of those big Latino drug dealer type guys one hears about so much in Florida? Maybe he racially profiled him. But either way, the idea that this fits some sort of Eisenhower template of Mr. and Mrs. White Picket Fence America being unable to get past their endemic race. It's not at all. This ought to be worth celebrate diversity. We've got here some kind of tragic murder, possibly a race crime, possibly racial bias. Who knows what it is? And no white Anglo-Saxon Protestant need be involved in it. Well, that's the Rainbow Coalition right there. I mean, this America needs to. America will not move on beyond this. I mean, the president's statement is really quite disgraceful. I mean, it's a matter for this particular police department in Florida why he should feel, and he says, oh, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon Martin. Does it always have to come back to you, Mr. President? Is it all about you? And actually, would your son look? What do you mean your son would look like Trayvon Martin? What does that mean? That he'd have like, he'd have a gold tooth? What does that mean? I don't even understand it. The point is, none of us knows what it is. The idea that of sort of inflaming it is irresponsible. But inflaming it to invoke a half-century outdated stereotype demographics in this country is completely absurd.